Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and this is video number 2 in my new series on Masonite 4. So in this first video, now that we've set up our Masonite project, the next step is going to be just learn how to set up a basic HTML page. Just like basically, first we're just going to explore using Masonite as a full stack framework, then later on we'll explore using it as a framework for building an API. Okay, so just to kind of show you an example that's already going to be there in the demo template. So like literally when you spin up your project, there's already an example, technically that main page. So you can see right from the get-go, there's a controller. Okay, and a controller is just a class. It's just a Python class that inherits from this controller class. And again, you'll see that you don't have to generate these by yourself. Like Masonite can generate these for you. But basically, that class has several methods, and these methods can determine something that happens. So in this case, it's saying view.render. View.render means render an HTML file. Okay, and the name of the file it's going to render gets passed in here. Okay, so essentially, in that where it looks is inside this templates folder. So when I say, hey, view render welcome, it's going to go to this templates folder and then look for a welcome.html. Okay. Now, the way Masonite works, kind of like Django and Flask, it's going to use Jinja as a templating language. So in the HTML, you can use syntax like this, which is Jinja. It's referred to as Jinja. So if I were to look up Python Jinja, you can learn the syntax for Jinja. We'll explore a little bit today. Okay, and there's your Jinja documentation. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Okay, but that's essentially how this works. So if I wanted to create a new view, okay, so every time you have a template or a route that renders a template, it's called a view. What I might want to do is first create a controller. Okay, so what I would do is down here, I'll say Python craft, and I want to create a controller, and the controller will be called, pages. Okay, we'll call it the pages controller. So if I just say Python craft controller pages, okay, and see it creates a pages controller. So now if I head back into my controllers folder, which you see right here, you'll see now there's a new file here called pages controller. You can see it already has all the boilerplate set up for you. So there's the class, it's already inheriting from controller, so we don't have to worry about any of that. Okay, neat. Okay, but right now the controller has just the view method. Okay, cool. So we'll leave it at that for now. And notice that this view method exists. So this view method is being passed in through what's called dependency injection. So the idea is that you declare a parameter with that thing, and that's going to allow you to receive that thing. So it's going to receive this view function as the variable view. Okay? And the reason is because we said it's a type of a view object. Now, again, view.render is going to allow us to render a particular file. So we're going to go back to our template section. And actually, let's create a whole new function. Or let's call this function something else. Okay, we'll just call this first page. Doesn't matter. You'll see why the function names do and don't matter. They could be called anything, but we're going to call it first page just to kind of signify what we're doing. Okay, it's the first page that we're creating. Okay, and then I'm going to head over to the templates, and I'm going to create a new file. So new file called firstpage.html. Okay, we'll come back to this. I'll just kind of put some boilerplate in there. Okay, so we'll just put it like an H1. Okay, first page. Cool. First page. Cool. Okay, nice. So there's the HTML file. And then what I can do is I'll go back to this pages control and say, hey, I want to render first page. That's the file I want to render. Nice. That was easy enough. And again, if it was in a folder, so you have like this is like views.welcome. Okay, you could just render it. Okay. First page. That works for me. Okay. And now we just need to connect this function to a route. So that's our controller, what's referred to as an action. So when you're using Laravel, Rails, Masonite just generally referred to as an action. So any of these functions in the controller class are an action, and that action, meaning the thing that happens when a particular URL is hit, has to be attached to a route. A route says this is the URL that has to be visited to trigger this action. Okay, so we're going to head over to our routes here. And I'm going to head over to web.py, and then we're just in this array here, this list. I'm just going to give this a comma and add a new route. So I'm going to just say route.get. Okay, and we're going to say /first page. Okay, and I am going to say basically we're going to use the pages controller. So I'm going to say pages controller, because it has to be the name of the class that you have over here, pages controller. And then and then we say at the name of the function. So at first page. So basic pages is the controller, first page is the action. Okay, at first page. So essentially what's going to happen is that whenever I go to the website /first page, so it's going to be like whatever the URL for the page /first page, it's going to run the first page function on the pages controller, and then that function just says render this HTML page, and then that's what's going to happen. So let's test this out. So if I go over here and I say Python craft serve, okay, and then I head back over to localhost 8000. How do I know it's 8000? Because it says so right here. So it says that it's serving it on 8000. Okay, and then I can say /first page, because that's the URL we set up in our routes. So see, it's /first page. Okay, and there we get that first page URL. Okay, cool. So now let's kind of go over what I can do with the Jinja syntax. So I'm going to assume that you already know HTML and CSS and all that fun stuff. Okay, so let's talk about Jinja. Okay, and if you've used other templating languages, like if you've used something like Svelte, or you've used Liquid, or you've used EJS, or ERB templates, or Blade templates in Laravel, this is going to seem very familiar. Always the first thing you kind of want to learn with a templating language is how to do sort of conditional stuff. So let's go here. Let's look for those. Right here, basics, undefined, custom filters, low level, just basics. Should be in the basics. Okay, show me some quick examples. Okay, should just be like a percentage sign with an if, but I want to see documentation. Okay, I think that's just more about the library itself. But here we go, template designer documentation. Okay, synopsis. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Okay, so essentially, well, that's going to be a for loop. I don't want to do that quite yet, but basically the idea is you have statements. So anytime you see like curly brackets percentage sign, these are going to be statements. So you're doing a thing. Okay, so notice like here, we're doing a for loop. So that's in there. This is going to be an expression. So that means you want to inject something. So whatever is in the double curly brackets is going to get injected there. Okay, so if I were to do this, first page, curly bracket, 2 plus 2, that's an expression, a Python expression, that resolves to the number 4. So now when I refresh this page, see, I get the number 4. Because now it's going to evaluate those two curly brackets and do the number 4. And then if you want to add a comment, that's just that. Okay, cool. But what I want to do is first the if. So there's variables, as you can see, where I did like an expression. We'll show you how to pass variables in a moment. But there's other cool filter features where you can do all sorts of really fancy stuff. Here we go. And then this is how like an if would look like. Okay. So if I were to do something like this, if I were to say like, if loop, well, we'll just say if 5, okay, let's just see here, There, that's more what I'm looking for. Okay, if 5 equals 5, which is going to be true, we're going to show this is a true statement. So we'll put like an H1 here. This is a true statement. And then we'll mark the end of where this if statement ends with that. So what this is saying is that if this resolves to be true, then this gets added to the HTML file. Because the idea is this all happens before the user actually gets the page from your application. So what happens is that Masonite, using the Jinja library, is going to read through this HTML file, look for all this Jinja markup, evaluate it, and then generate an actual finished HTML file based on evaluating those statements. Okay? And then that's what the user gets. So you can say, hey, like, you know, if the user's logged in, or hey, let's loop over all the user's posts. So this way, you're not having to handcraft every bit of HTML. So this is a true statement, and if, so watch what happens. So right now, 5 equals 5 is true. So that's going to be right there. So we'll see this is a true statement. Now let's say I make it false. 4 equals 5 equals 4. That's not true. So if I refresh this, see it disappears because the if is not true. So anything inside this if block will not show up. Okay, back to the Jinja templating language. Okay, just to show you some other examples. Okay, there's a lot of different things you can do with Jinja, which is why it's so popular. You can use in all of these different libraries. Okay, we can loop over stuff, so let's try that out. So if I wanted to do a loop, it would look like this. Okay, and I'll say like for, and we'll just say for num. And since I haven't passed any data to this thing, I'm just going to make up an array. So for every num in, and I'll just make up an array. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. And then what's going to happen is that this is going to loop over this list, this array, and then num will be 1 on the first loop, then num will be 2 on the next loop. So it'll keep doing whatever is inside for each item. So percentage and 4. Okay, so then I'll just say a H3 that has num inside of it. Okay, now when you go here, refresh, and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, I didn't actually have to write an H3 with 1, and H3 with 2, and H3 with 3. This just loops over the data and creates this HTML for each loop of the data. So again, the idea is, imagine like the user has a bunch of blog posts. I pass the array of blog posts to this template and then loop over it using Jinja. But how would I pass data to this template? How would I say, hey, template, I want you to have this variable that you can loop over and do things with? Okay, well, every different framework has a way of passing data to the template. So let's take a look if we see an example here. Okay, views. I think it's going to be applying a separate section. Views. Here we go, views. Okay, so looking at the documentation. And see, what you would do is you would pass a dictionary as the second argument to render, which is pretty much how it works in most frameworks and templating libraries I've ever used. So what would happen is if I wanted to pass this array instead, so instead of giving it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here and just writing it arbitrarily, I can go back to my page's controller and say, as the second argument, I'll make a dictionary, and in there we'll have a key of nums. Okay, and then this will equal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'll add 6 just so you can see that it is using this. So then now this dictionary is being passed to that HTML file. So now in the context of this HTML file, I can just now refer to nums. Okay, so nums exists because I passed it in the render function. So I'm saying this HTML file with this data. So again, Masonite will then use Jinja to evaluate that HTML file using those variables that are passed inside that dictionary. Okay, and there we go. So I can now, if I refresh this, I should see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there it is. There's the 6, because now it's passing it passing that data. Okay, very, very cool. Let's just see here. Any fun? Okay, this is just some other more advanced features. Okay. Yeah, those are all more cool advanced features. But you can see kind of like the basics of how you can use Jinja for templating. Now, another cool thing you can do is you can use a template. So like basically, Masonite already has that set up for you on the get-go. So you'll see like there's this base.html. So what you can do is instead of having to like redesign your whole site, you could use this base.html to kind of edit the layout. And instead what you do is you inject whatever the content for that page is in here. Okay? You can kind of see an example of that here. So you notice how it says it's extending the base HTML. That means, hey, I want to use this base file. So basically, think of that as like the skeleton for the page. And then I want you to inject this. If in that template there's a block called title, inject this content. And if in that template there's a block called content, inject this data. So let's take a look. If I go to the base, is there a block called title? Yep, right there. So there's the block called title. There's also a block called head in case you want to inject some extra CSS files or anything like that. Okay, so what you can do is you can link to the different CSS files here. Okay, you can link, there's the content block, and then I guess here's if you wanted to inject any JavaScript. So you would just make another HTML file with like a JavaScript block and call it the JS block or something. It would just inject the JavaScript for that particular page. So in that case, what I would do is on this first page, okay, what I can do is I can get rid of like 90% of this stuff. I'll just get rid of all of this. Okay, and I'm going to copy this over from welcome. So I'll just copy this much. Okay, so that way I'm extending the base.html. Okay, and then we'll just say the title of this page is first page. And then again here, end block. Okay, and then maybe if I wanted to have some JavaScript on the page, I would go use that JS block. So I would copy this and say target the JS block. So then here I can write any JavaScript inside of a script tag. So I'll just put the script tag here and just write any JavaScript I need for that particular page. You know, let's say I have like jQuery loaded in. I can then just use jQuery and then just target that particular page. Okay, so then the JavaScript would be there, and I can just write my like h1 hello world here. I can just do my for loop for num of nums. Let me just end the for. So that ends that for block. And then I can just say, hey, for each num, I want to do an h3 of nums. Okay. And then again, what I'm going to do is here in the base.html, I'm going to just put here saying like like a header block that says header, just so we can visually see that we're using this base template. And just say here, footer. So now if I go over here and I refresh this page, oops, I think I wrote of instead of in. There we go. In nums, I refresh. And see, the errors are pretty explanatory. See, they tell you exactly what the problem is. Okay, so I can see like, oh, I was supposed to do an in here, but I did of instead. Okay, see, a token generally just means like, you know, I wrote that word. So hey, I expected an in as the token there because it got the for before, and that's the Jinja syntax. Then I got an of. So if I refresh the page, now it's working. Although I didn't put two curly brackets here, so I'll put a second set of curly brackets. There we go. And so you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, except that should be num, not nums. I don't want to print out the whole array that many times. There we go. And there we go. And you can see it, header and footer. But never did I put the header and footer on this page. The reason why the header and footer show up is because I extended base.html. So it takes all these blocks that I have in this file. Okay, and then I can do over here, I can just do something like console.log hello world. Refresh the page. And if I open up the JavaScript console here, I can see that hello world because this JavaScript is running. Okay, so I can just, you know, interject just normal plain vanilla JavaScript, or maybe I can use like Reactor View, and I'll end up with a light touch. More than likely, you probably want to use something called Alpine.js for this. It'll give you an easy way to kind of inject a little bit of stateful logic in your templates. But yeah, so that would make your life a lot easier. So that is how you do it. Okay, so again, you just figure out, hey, what do I want the page to look like? I would edit this base file to be your sort of template. So I would like make like the header and the footer there, and then again use these blocks. So it's kind of already set up for you, and then you can use these blocks in your different files. So again, you create an HTML file. It's going to have whatever blocks that you want to make use of. Extend that base.html, whichever file you want to extend, that's your base, and you go from there. And this allows you to kind of end up writing a lot less HTML and have pages that are different. So again, as the different users log in, they'll see their content because you send their content to the template, not some other user's content. So that's so far. Okay. And then, yeah, so that's what I want to cover today. So that was views. So now we'll just, again, you would generate a controller. That was like Python craft controller, and then the name of the controller. That's going to create a controller, which allows you to create these functions. And then you can attach those to a route in the web, in routes/web.py, okay, which you just write a line of code like this. And again, whenever that URL hits, this function will run. That function renders this template, so it's going to look for this HTML file in the templates folder, and then also include this data that can be referenced in that template. So then in that template, first page, I can now refer to nums because I declared it when I rendered the template. So just with that, you can start having a lot of fun with Masonite. Okay, so right now what I would do is just go out there, make a few test pages, kind of get used to it. And we'll go from there, and we'll start exploring a little bit more in the next video. But I'll see you all later on. Have a great day and enjoy.